Should I do this? I think so. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells in the Quran, A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O the ones who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, save yourself and your families from the punishment of hellfire. This is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has commanded the believers to do so. With that being said, in the new school year in full swing, most of the children are in school now. So Masjid al-Huda thought that it would be a good idea for us to have an event in relation to that. And that is the program that we have advertised for us this evening. And the subject is challenges facing the Muslim youth and parents. And with us this evening is we have Brother Habeeb Quadri with us, and I'll just give you a brief intro of him. He's an educator and a published author and a youth activist who also serves on the National Advisory Board of Muslim Youth of North America and the board of the Illinois Coalition of Non-Public Schools, CISNA, which stands for Council of Islamic Schools of Illinois, and IQRA. He also holds a seat at the Harvard University Graduate School of Education Principals Advisory Board. He's also the superintendent of MCC Academy. Brother Habeeb has also been selected. He was selected as a National Distinguished Principal by the National Association of Elementary School Principals. He was one of the only 4 private school teachers, 4 private school leaders in the entire nation who was selected. So we're incredibly honored for Brother Habeeb to be with us here this evening. And the format of the program will be as follows. He will present for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, we will open it up for question and answers from the parents that are here. The rest of the time will be dedicated for question and answer. This is an event for you. And for the sisters that are here, we're going to send this microphone upstairs so you can ask the questions that you have. And inshallah, we will get the answers for them. And I'm incredibly grateful for Brother Habeeb to be here, despite he informed me earlier in the afternoon that his father was very ill. Despite that, he's here with us this evening, and I thank him for that, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him shifa kamila. Ameen. Jazakumullah khairan. And we'll get started.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulil kareem. First and foremost, may Allah bless you on a Friday where you could go anywhere else after reading after Salatul Maghrib to take a few minutes. And alhamdulillah, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about, especially more than ever before, all of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we talk about kids and challenges, we only think maybe is it happening now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His beautiful infinite wisdom, Allah reminds us that in the purpose of worship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's purpose of creation in Surah Dariyah, مَا خَلَقْتَ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, I have created jinn and man for the purpose of worship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells that I created people to worship me. Worship is ibadat, but then also mu'amalat, dealing with people, acting. Young ones here, when you're the way when you talk to someone, when you're at school and you're being good and smile, you get hasanat. You're taking an exam and you don't cheat, you get good deeds. you're playing sports and you don't get mad and you just be nice about it, even though when you have a right to get mad or you want to push the person, but you don't push the person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you and you get hasanat. But at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of tells us regarding this, that our individuals, that when Allah test us, Allah also tells us that our children will be a test. So for you young ones, you're like, man, why do my parents always on my case? I myself grew up here. I grew up in Chicago Public School. My father came in 1960. He's about 88 now. So I went to Chicago Public School, played high school ball, sat on the bench in college at UIC, right? The idea of getting opportunity. So you have those challenges, right? And when you grow up here, there are things that you are going to go through. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that your child will be a test, as young ones, you have to realize your parents are going to be worried. And you as individuals have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just test you guys. It's not like, oh my God, are we the only ones that are getting all this test? Allah, and for you parents, when we get frustrated with our own kids, because I'm trying to talk to both groups, the parents and the young. For parents, you have to realize Allah didn't test just you. We're not the only generation that are going to get tested with our kids. Allah gives us an examples of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. Before video games, TV, any Call of Duty, any form of violence, Fortnite, Allah shows us a story of one brother jealous of another brother to a point he kills him. And this is before anything else. Allah gives us an example of a prophet of Allah, kids. Then Allah gives us another example where he doesn't just talk to his son and say, oh, son, come to the deen for 5 years or 10 years, sending him to Sunday school or whatever school at that time that could be. 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, 200 years. The scholars say Prophet Nuh alayhi salam's son was 300 years old, about 300 years old, when the great flood happened. So now Allah gives us an example of another situation where now he keeps on, conveying the message. His wife and his kids don't follow the deen. But what does he do? Prophet Nuh keeps on making dua until Allah says, no more. One lesson we learned, we keep on asking dua for our kids, and you never lose hope in our kids. I don't care what they did. You do not close your doors with them, because the worst thing that could ever be is associating with Allah. Everything else, we want to keep on working, and Allah's help, because if the shepherd is good to the sheep, even if the sheep gets lost, he'll find his way back home. Same thing now for the students. When your parents are like, oh my God, they're always nagging. They're like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. The reason why your parents are worried, because they want the best for you in this world and the best in the hereafter. And you say, wait a minute, best in this world and the best in the hereafter? I want us to think about this. I'm going to finish in 15 minutes. I'm keeping a timing. From all the supplications Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, going to the bathroom, Allahumma a'udhu min khubsi wal khaba'is. Getting in the car, subhanallah, so on and so forth. Going to sleep, bismillah amutu ahya. There are du'as, supplications that the Prophet told us to do at certain times. There are du'as that we say in salah. There are du'as that we do on certain times of the day. Some Quran. From all the supplications, the Super Bowl, from the once in a lifetime Hajj or Umrah, where all the sins can be wiped away, Allah tells the believers, when you put on your ihram, say, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika la. When you go, do not pray salah when you walk into the masjid. Do not pray anything, but when you go, do tawaf. I want you here, young ones, I want you to remember which dua did Allah tell the Prophet to tell the believers, that when you get to the masjid, say any dua that you want. But the last part of every circuit, when you do Hajj, when Allah can wipe away all your sins, from Yemeni corner to Hazrat al-Aswad, the one dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the believers to say, he's like, when you come and see me, to wipe anything and when anything you want, don't forget this dua. Rabbana, our Lord, atina, give us, fid dunya, in this world, hasanatun, good things, wa fil akhirati, in the hereafter, hasanatun, good things, wa qina adhaban nar, and save us from the hellfire. Allah wants you young ones to have the best in this world. There's nothing wrong to get the nicest car, the nicest clothes, the nicest shoes, but at the same time, you need to remember where it comes from. It comes from Allah who blessed your parents, and your parents being so kind enough to give it to you. But you also have to strive for the same time and effort that you play 3-4 hours video games so you can get to the next level or whatever, from Minecraft to Call of Duty to NFL 2K, whatever that is. You have, right? I know some of you guys are laughing. You have the right to play it. But if it takes you away with 3-4 hours and you forget Salah, or you forget to do your duties to your parents, that's when you have to balance. So if you're getting 2-3 hours, Salah takes 25 minutes. You to pay the basic minimum. 5 times 5, 25, maybe 30 minutes. So you're playing for 2 hours. Allah says, just give me 30 minutes of your time. Your parents are reminding you better, just take your time and pray. Reading Quran, even 2 pages a day. Page a day, keep shaitan away. All right? Even reading a page, 10 minutes, 5 minutes of your time, Allah will give you reward for every letter. Video game, when you're playing and you're reading it, you're not, but fine. Allah lets us have fun. So you want to strive to have the academics, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you also take care for the akhirah. And we're going to talk about, because lately there's going to be a lot more challenges some of you have, which I'm going to open up for Q&A with stuff that's happening. But Allah gives us another example when parents say, you know what, I know my kid. We come from this khandan. We can never do anything wrong. Or we come from this place in the city of back home. Allah humbles all of us, where Allah gives us another example of the prophet. Where this prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, reminds us his grandfather was a prophet. He was a prophet. And his brothers decided, should we kill him or should we not throw him in the well and see what happens? So when we realize Allah gives us examples of that, even the most beloved to Allah had challenges in family, we cannot be shocked. But what we have to do is we do our best, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of the rest. I'm going to say that one more time, for the young ones. I want you to realize what Allah wants us to do is do our best in their deen, in the academics, in the dunya. And Allah will take care of the rest. But everything that we achieve, we realize it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that becomes very important. And I think that's what I want you guys to kind of understand and see how important that is. All right, so that becomes 2. Now, why do we bring this up? Because Allah then tells us in Surah Mulk, right, that I have created life and death to see who's best in conduct. So we know we have to worship Allah. That's our purpose. And worshiping is also dealing with people. It's not just Salah, it's everything. The way we behave, the way we act, the way we dress, we can get rewarded. Right now, all of you have covered yourself properly the way Allah had wanted us to us. You get good deeds for every moment. That's how Allah wants us to get into Jannah, right? You walk every step in every car ride, every minute, every step, how many miles it was, one good deed was added, one bad deed is taken away. You prayed your Salah in Jamaat, Allah rewards you 27 times more. So Allah wants us to get tested with to see who's best in deeds. So why is this important? Because students, how you learn, how you retain information is right here. What you see and hear is how you retain information. What you discuss is how you retain information, 70%. William Glasser's a Harvard psychologist, talks about this. So if that's what it is, you know that your parents are worried for 8 to 9 hours at school, 2-3 hours at phone or on TV. You are seeing and hearing, discussing things that can get you closer to Allah, or it could take you away from Allah. And that's why your parents worry about you. Parents, that's why when you're at school, you need to know what is going on and what opportunities, because what they see and hear, what they experience, 80% of how they're going to learn is what they experience. 95% is when they teach someone else. So from 50 to 85 are what they see and hear, what they discuss on their group chats, on Discord, wherever those websites and apps you have, Allah, you realize that's what Allah's seeing you, and this is how you might gain some information. So with that aspect, if we know what Allah says is our purpose, Allah now tells us through example that this world is a test. Allah gives us that prophets have been challenged and their families have been challenged. And Allah says that this world, that all of us are going to be judged. You will be tested in different ways. So when we wrote the book, War Within the Hearts, the Struggles of the Muslim Youth, we had looked at and said, what were the pressures kids had? So we had listed various topics that people had thought and kids had told us. So all of you at certain times in your school will be questioned or tested with some of these topics. And how you navigate to those are going to be challenges. And lately, in the last year or two, we will have some more moral questions that they have brought up. So that's why the Sheikh had asked me to keep the minutes open, for Q&A. And now that's why I was going to speak for 15 minutes. Right now, I've spoken for 11 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's why I wanted you guys to understand that these challenges, we want to keep it open. Now, some of you might feel uncomfortable. Like, man, if I ask a question, everyone's thinking it's me. Parents, I want you to realize if that child's asking, it doesn't mean, but it's there. Or if a parent's asking, it doesn't mean, oh my God, it must be about the child. But what they might see are the sheikh might just ask in general of things that they've heard about. If not, I could talk for another hour myself. But and when we had talked about, when these topics were given about 8, 9 years ago, so we are writing a new version this year, inshallah, the 3.0 version of War Within the Hearts, because the new topics, atheism, the LGBTQ conversation, all these other topics we're adding on. But when they had talked about what were the biggest topics that were coming up at school, these were some of the things in fitting pressure, identity, crisis. The one that shocked them was double personality, number 3. Kids said, if I told my parents what I'm going through, they might not be happy. This is about 8, 9 years ago, so it's better to not say anything and keep it to yourself. And in front of the house, be like, the mashallah ji ami, kuch nahi. And then back home, at school, you're doing something else, right? So that kind of got us. Experimenting, religious extremism were kind of challenges that you had saw that individuals were going through. So with that setup, our background, I'm going to keep it open for Q&A because everyone might have different questions they want to have because there's a lot of challenges. Each one I could talk about and we could go. So I'm going to first select the time because I wanted to make sure a lot of times the presentations will go for 50 minutes and there's only 5 minutes. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. If there are stuff that we feel like there's no more, I'm going to go back and explain some of these in more details. Is that fair? Right? We're going to finish. For all you young ones, we're not going to go past 9 o'clock. I'm a believer that, after an hour, people lose their time, 50 minutes. So right now, it's been 13 minutes and 27 seconds when I started talking. All right? So with that, Sheikh, do you want to open it up for Q&A? And then from there, we could take some of these topics and I could keep these up, or any other issue that you feel that we want to go ahead and talk about. Because I'm going to give you guys some tips at the end, right? But I just wanted to make sure first I give opportunity for Q&A. And I think they have also I think sister, there's a mic too, yes.
So we'll go ahead and open up for question and answer. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll take turns. Raise your hand and ask the question. If it's not loud enough, we'll repeat the question. I've already sent the microphone upstairs. If the sisters have a question, please feel free to use the microphone and ask your questions. The rest of the time, we're going to wrap it up at 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, we're going to wrap it up because Brother Habeeb has to go back, and it's a far distance that he has to go back to. So inshallah, we have 45 minutes just for you for Q&A. So with that being said, please raise your hand if you have a question.
Is there a way they could text it or no? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yes. Oh, yes. 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 Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question. So one of the things is that, 70% is what they discuss. And especially as parents, look, I go throughout the United States and I've talked. With my own kids, I might have to have someone else say the same thing, right? Because I'm Baba, right? And so one of the things is that what we've realized discussion is how, as parents, one thing we have to open up everyday communication in the sense of what's going on. I'm a big believer that dinner is a great time to sit down and talk. When we were young, it used to be maghrib time, everyone comes in and eats. Now everyone's on their phones and talking. So one aspect is sitting together and having conversations. And sometimes parents, I would tell them, except starting off where we always go, Beta, what'd you do today? Nothing. Oh, school. It was boring. All right. And then he's like, what's going on? I'm like, well, just say more. I don't know. Wait, this is your attitude. The mom's like, let's not all get arguments. I think it's very important that as even adults, I'm always like, hey, this is what happened at school today. And this is what happened at work. Hey, my wife, how'd your day go? Ask the kids, what are just what's going on? But I think one of the key factors is as parents, we need to do 4 things. One, we need to communicate with our kids, and figure out what's going on, or what are you hearing from the community and other kids plays a big part. Second thing is after you figure out what's going on is to educate kids on certain topics, like today. Like if not, even if I don't have Q&A, I'm going to talk about some topics where I'm going to say, hey, heads up. Because what we have to do is now we can't just say back when we grew up was, don't worry, let's not talk about taboo conversation. If you don't bring it up, every kid is going to go to Sheikh Google. Sheikh Google is going to give you information. Sheikh Google is going to teach you some stuff, and then kids, because why? They're going to go to a website, you don't know what it is, it has a guy with the big beard, don't know who really that sheikh is, because you can take a picture from any sheikh, plop them on a website, and you see that you have sometimes websites by Islamophobes, and you have extremism. I dealt with Homeland Security. Every single situation of some extremist kid, any 18 to 25, 30-year-old, none of the 200 people they've arrested in America have been connected to a masjid or a school. Alhamdulillah. Everyone's been connected to an online website with a kid. Like I read the FBI report about 1 or 2. Even this one kid that they were getting, they had him go to the imam of that one masjid and said, what's your view? The report says, Imam said you should not be thinking about this. This is not our deen, Islam. They went to make him go to another person, like 2-3 months. They were trying to entrap, stuff like that. Is this videotape? Oh, is it? Okay, thanks for the heads up. Okay, so I don't get myself in. Gonna get me in trouble at the FBI, right? Right. But the idea is, okay, I gotta figure about some stuff. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. So, at the end, there were certain things on these reports. So none of them have been connected. So I always, believe. So one time I went to, looked at what these have. So some of these extreme groups, they have these videos when they go, and when kids start clicking on it, you start having individuals start, their dummy websites, and they want to see who are doing this consistently, then you try to befriend them. But at the same time, what happen is that when the kids read stuff, they just warp and change the verses. And that's why if you don't have an option for kids where you could say, like a sheikh and say, I want to ask this question, how do you respond to this? This becomes problematic. So this is why the idea is after communicating, educating, then advocating. Because at school, if you want your kid to say, look, I want you to pray. If we ourselves, when we started even at Niles West North, we had started about 90s and saying, hey, we need a place, we want our kids to play, can you have a meditation room for anyone to go and pray? Some kids might be proud and say, I want to go pray. Some you need to set it up so it's easy for them to do it. For them, we decided, hey, you know what, Jummah prayers. We have Jummah prayers. Now we have a meditation room. Then we said, for swimming classes, why can't we have, there's a lot of research about boys and girls having it separate. So freshman year, swimming is separate at Niles West North. We're like, how do you separate, have that? Or we're, pushing stuff and saying, well, you know what, for our kids, they might feel uncomfortable, but they need to wear sweatpants and not shorts when they play. Or the boys need to, whatever it is, or the girls need to wear their scarves. If we don't advocate, because we can't just be like, brother, kid, you have to be strong for your deen. I remember sometimes you have the uncles like, don't be scared. Right? I remember we went to a park. He's like, so go say the adhan. And everyone's like, Allah. Right? Then he's like, and uncle's in the front. There's all of us in the back. And we're in the middle of the whole park. And he's like, we're going to all pray together. Right? The whole back line, everyone's looking right? Uncle's reading the longest surah in the possible. Right? And we did the same thing. And I say, hey, look, so we take our kids sometimes to a UIC game because easy to find tickets. And so we're going to pray Jummah. We're going to pray Salah there at halftime. But what we'll do is we'll take 30 kids and say, hey, 15 of you pray. The other 10 are going to watch to make sure if someone comes, security to inform them, this is what you're doing so you don't have to look around, people saying anything. We're going to have someone, right? How do you make it successful for people to practice the deen? And that's one of the big things is to realize Allah is beautiful. Allah is once merciful and just wants us to just do certain things. So that's why we as parents have to advocate. But students, you need to tell us. Your parents can't advocate for you if you don't tell us, right? If you don't tell them, they don't know, but they ask you, but why are you getting my business? They're getting in your business because there's a lot of people doing crazy things in the world, right? There are 30 million people using drugs in America. You think they started off when they were young? For you young ones, I want you to realize, I worked at Community Green with the drug rehab, right? And one of the one of the things, a wellness center. No, you know, a kid, when he comes small, you know how when someone goes, Ahmad, Johnny, what do you want to be when you grow up? When you're small, you're like, I want to be a football player. I want to be a fireman. Sometimes you used to see, like, you know, the garbage trucks. You're like, I want to be a garbage man because you see the big truck. You're like, exciting, right? Do you ever see a young kid like, hey, Johnny, hey, Ahmad, what do you want to be when you grow up? Woo, I can't wait to be a cocaine addict. Woo, it'd be so great. Heroin. Would you ever see anyone say, man, that's where I want to be when I grow up? But how many people start from smoking to drugs? It starts from something small. 1 out of 3 people, if I told you 1 out of 3 people would die from drinking this in about 30 years from after you start using it, 15 to 30 years, would you take the chance? Some of you guys might, you know, but because it's good, you might say, like, hey, I'm going to try that. But majority of people would be like that. But 1 out of 3 people die from smoking. But people still do it because they'll say, hey, you know what, 50, 30 years, Allah decides I'm going to take that chance. That's why we realize Allah cuts things at the roots, right? Allah didn't tell Adam, don't eat from the tree. He said, taqribu, don't go near the tree. So that's why when we go, you know, for clubs or parties, if you get close to something, you might be tempted, right? Same thing with alcohol, that if you start getting closer, you might get used to it. And then when you're not thinking, you might do something un-Islamic or against Allah's commandment. So that's why this idea of now communicating with your kids, educating your kids, advocating for your kids, and then checking up on your kids. I'll give you an example. Kids, you might be feeling, oh, you know what, they need to trust me. Anyone trusts, but at the same time, you're going to have to make sure that if you're around people. I travel. I had a basketball team. We went to Phoenix, Las Vegas, Arizona, Long Beach. We're on a team. This is before cell phones. My father, he said he would call me at 6 o'clock at the hotel, the other guys at 10:30 at the hotel, 11:30 that I didn't go out, right? Because if I know my father's not going to check on me and all the other guys on my team are going out, there's a high percentage temptation is going to. So you have to have checks and balance. One is just the Quran and, you know, taqwa and the fear conscious of Allah, but then Allah puts people like your parents or having friends who are going to make sure you don't do something wrong. You have to realize that. One of the guys I travel with, Control Davis, you know, he used to make fun. They used to all make fun of me, like, man, I can't believe your dad calling you at 10 o'clock, 10:30. You can't go out, so strict. What's wrong with this? I'm like, Baba, you know. But one of the Control Davis, I remember he said, you know what, Habeeb, you know, we're all making fun of you, but we respect that. Why? Because, you know what, I don't even know who my dad is, right? I'm even there. No one's even there to even check on me. That same individual, when I'm a sophomore at UIC, a freshman, because he was 1 year under me, or 2 years, I can't remember. The coach calls me. He says, hey, Habeeb, guess what? You know, Control Davis, he got shot on Kedzie and Lawrence, right by where I used to live, right, on the alley, right? Because he used to do, you know, he used to also be a gang member, or being around gang members. So you never know who or what could happen, right? And I'm thinking, subhanAllah, you know, he used to make fun of it, but at the same time, he's like, look, he even told me, I don't know what my purpose is. Like, you already have something you're thinking about. So I want us to realize the challenges. And when we go and we look at certain places and some of the people and stuff, it's not like we're not, prone. Muslims are not going to do things. And we lightly in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen kids do some things. We've seen kids get shot. We've seen kids get alcohol abuse, drug abuse, right? And now there's questions of this challenging of our faith. We have to be proud of who we are and in a respectful way, be firm with our faith and the questions that people are challenging and then they're asking us. So that answering that one question, that's why I want your kids to understand why the parents want to communicate so they could understand, help you. Just like from academics, you don't understand something, they could get you a tutor. Same thing, so you could be successful, go to great college. Or if you want to play sports, they might get you on a practicing squad so you can become a better player or an athlete or artist or some club or some skill sets. In the same way for the deen, they need you to find someone. So the same way in school you're struggling, they want to advocate for you to be successful. They want to advocate for you to make it easy for you to pray. Then fourth, just like in school, they're going to make sure, how's your grades? I want to check on them. The only way they can check is like, hey, they might not be checking. Allah's not going to tell us you did your 5 salahs, you didn't. But the only way they can do is they constantly remind you, did you pray? Did you do your salahs? Are you being good? Who's on your group chat? Right? And that's another whole thing. If your parents didn't give you a phone until high school, they're a phenomenal parent. I understand that you think you know your limits, but how many of us can go on this and can't stop? Because of Instagram, so on and so forth. It's challenging, right? And it's not you. You guys are good guys, our ladies back there. But the thing is, you might have someone send you a pic that you don't want, but that's not you. Because whatever you want to see, whoever you want to talk to, whenever you want to talk to is on this. I tell you, parents, at home, it's better to have a laptop than a phone. And have the laptop in the kitchen because Muslims like to eat and everyone's going to walk by the kitchen. Having it in their rooms, there's nothing good happening in their rooms. Especially because all of us, as we get older, we sleep by 10:30 and they're staying up until 1, 2 o'clock. And you have the whole this satellite TV, which you have like 500 channels. If you have a TV, you need to put blocks on the TV. You have to put a blocks. You know, like my wife has a password on the thing. That way, if you want to watch something, you just be like, hey, hit the password. Same thing on our TV, computers, phones. You have to have screen time that parents will control. iPhones are really good at that. That way, they could still have that. Again, you might be like, what am I doing? No one's saying that you can't watch TV. I didn't say anything about watching TV, but there are certain things on internet, TV, or the web, World Wide Web that could be concerning. And that's why we're trying to make sure and say, how do we limit you from doing something? Because Allah knows us that when we get close to something, we might get tempted to kind of go and we don't know our limits. Some of us might. Some might jump in the water and swim back out, but some might drown. And that's that fear our parents have of why they always want to keep you guys in check, right? So video games. I'm sorry, any questions? Yeah. Questions? Yes.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Habeeb, coming here all the way. Question is that you mentioned that two-phase life, right, for the child.
Yeah.
Especially, what's the advice for parents how to tackle that or understand that the child is having two-phase life, or he's in situation where he's saying yes, everything is good, but on the other hand, he goes to school and do things which is right out of our control, but he comes home, he looks normal. So how you tackle that part?
Tackle the part when your kids, when the kids are saying?
Dual personality.
Oh, dual personality. Yeah. Dual personality. And this is where I think it's very important. You have to know who their friends are. Like that place, like I went to Chicago public schools, right? And back then we had I took the train to the west side for a game, right? We didn't have school buses in the 70s, 80s, especially the CPS system, right? That's why all you kids, you are lucky. That's why all of our parents moved to the suburbs after a while, right? After roughing it in the 70s and 80s and being made fun of quite a bit. So the big thing is, it is so important that because of the 50s, 60s of discussion, friends play a big part. When you're young ones, when your parents are like, okay, who are your friends and what they're doing? Because it's human nature. You have discussions, you have things, you joke around. And this is where you have to kind of be like, okay, let's see, what are you guys discussing? What's there? And if you realize that every time that we're coming about you guys don't want to talk to us, you're being closed, then that brings up more curiosity for us, right? There's a concern. Like, okay, what's going on? And so our duty is that's why having like youth programs where you have times and saying, and kids, just 1 hour of your 24-hour life is not too much, right? Even if you can, maybe hour and a half. By the time you drive, come back, go home. But in that hour, what we're trying to do, your parents are trying to do, is make you start thinking and saying, hey, we just want you to have fun, but remember some parameters, because parents realize when you were 3, 4 years old, you guys were everything about mama. You would not go to a store without being close to us. You guys, when you walk into the car, you're like, Mama, I did this in school. Baba, I did this in school. You're the greatest Mama, Baba in the whole wide world. You let your parents pick your clothes, right? You didn't care. You said, pick any clothes, anything you want. That same child, think about it as a parent. Your mom took care of you until she had you 9 months. Then she had that. Change your diapers, everything. That same child that tell you everything is by 13 years old, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, when you were young and you be standing up and meeting everyone, hugging everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi becomes salams. How was your day? Good. What you do? Nothing. How was school? Boring. You don't know anything. Go on the computer. You don't have to bother me. You don't understand. You're not that, you don't know this world. You're just too much. Even though they got you everything that you wanted. Somehow all you 16, 18-year-olds got cars when we didn't get a car until 24. Nice, Toyota Corollas. Camrys were like elite cars back then. Now you got 16-year-olds getting like, BMWs, right? So you guys want to hold on. I ain't hating. I'm just saying, mashallah. But there has to be some appreciation. So if they're going to give you I don't think anyone at the age of 14, 15 ever got $1 million device. I mean, $1,000 device, which all of our kids have $1,000 devices, right? Right? So again, what we're trying to say is that their parents are still loving you to give it to you, right? They're giving it, but at the same time, we need to also be a little tough love too, because now we're kind of more like, oh, just give it. So we have to balance, but when you get this, that comes with responsibility, and the way they're going to check responsibility is the way you act. So if the more you're going to hide stuff from us, then our parents, we're going to think like, okay, what are you doing, right? So that's that balance. But as parents, we have to put things like, if your child, especially from 0 to 13, Monday through Friday, school nights, it should only be like 1 hour of screen time. And you think you can do it? I have 3 kids. 2 of them are graduating, in high school. One's going to high school. You can't control up to 6th, 7th grade. 2 hours of screen time, 1 hour. I mean, we did 1 hour, right? That means playing checkers, all the other games, maybe video games for an hour. And balancing things out plays a big part. Because if you don't bring habits when they're young, as they get old, it becomes a problem. If you don't bring them to the masjid when they're young, then it becomes older when they're older. When you don't start any habits, academic habits, but the akhlaq and tahdib, those also have to start when they're young, right? Some of the things that you learn like back home, there's some great cultural habits, all right? Respecting the elders and so on and so forth. Everything has to be balanced. We don't have to go extremes on both, but that becomes certain things that we have to realize at a young age. It is very important that we're going to, but one thing I realized at teenage years, like the first 7 years, you love your child, right? Even in our deen, that they have that. The next 7 years, that's when the 7 to 13 is a little bit more strict. After 14, you have to be more their friends, right? You kind of listen. So even with my own son, I have to maybe have someone else talk to him, right? Or give that same advice. It's just like husband and wife. Someone, a third person tells you something, like the imam or a counselor, it's like, well, that's a great idea. And I'm like, I said that. The way you said it didn't make sense. This person made sense. It just happens, right? Because you don't want to hear from the same people all the time. Even for me, as my thing, I'm Baba. So they're like, oh, Baba, here he goes again. I still have to remind them that's my job. That's why I joke around with my kids. I said, your mom gave you life. My job is to teach you about life, right? So I'm going to tell you stuff. Mom's going to be the, I'm like, fine, right? But I'm going to have to, if that means tough love in a respectful way, you hang out, you do that. That's why for parents now, hanging out with your kids and fathers with your daughters, you have to have relationships. You have to have relationship with your daughters. Hanging out, going out, telling them. You don't want the first guy at high school to be like, girl, you're the most beautiful thing, and no one ever told her that. The first person I ever said that you're beautiful is dad. Like I tell my daughter's 18, I tell her, hey, I want you to always remember, the first guy who ever loved you is Baba. The last guy who's ever going to love you is going to be Baba, right? So just keep that in mind, right? So those are certain things that you have to, especially in a society where it's all about this romance, this TV, that show. You want to make sure that they realize that's there. Same thing for boys. I know sometimes tough love, but we also got to be like, hey, look, we're going to hear you out. Because if we're always on them like this, especially most of our kids who are good academically, are mostly doing well, and maybe that 1, 2 things we're doing, we have to always step back and say, alhamdulillah, they do 8 out of the 10. We also have to be making sure that we don't get on these kids where they get frustrated. Like I realized one of the things that mom was my buffer for dad. And if it wasn't for basketball, right, I didn't have TV. We didn't watch TV, limited TV until I got to college. I don't know, VCR, cable only happened after I got married. But the thing was, the idea of having some form of basketball was my outlet. You have to have kids something because everything can't be like family. Because after a while, you want the kids to have their buffer, have their friends, but can it be located in the masajid or some other places? Could be very good. Any other questions?
If the sisters have a question, they can ask now too as well. You have the microphone upstairs, so we'll give you a couple of seconds. If not, then we'll go for the brother here. But we'll give it about 10 seconds if the sisters have any question.
And we have 1, and there's 2.
If not, the brothers are going to take it now.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. My question is some of the tips for the self-confidence. I see a lot of kids, especially with all the discussions around different topics these days. There seems to be a concern regarding that part, especially if they go to public schools or when they go to college. So what are some of the tips on that one?
For self-confidence, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing is very important, that at a young age, and for individuals to give them opportunities. And you see, sometimes you have kids who have hobbies, and I realize hobbies is a big thing. See, one is academics. Some kids are going to be great, and that's going to become their confidence. Not everyone's going to be academic. Some might be athletics, right? Athletics was my confidence to be like, I'm proud of who I am. Some, it might be some skill sets that they have, arts, chess. There could be some other skill sets, and sometimes that helps manifest it. The second thing is helping and kind of talking through. If you notice at a young age that sometimes your child's already quiet, you have to start kind of bringing them out and saying, okay, let's go ahead and let's start playing at a young age. I'm a big believer in young age, boys and girls, to have them play in some form of sports, right? Or some group activity, because you have to learn how to work with others. And then sometimes that teams win, it becomes a self-confidence boost because they're part of something. Sometimes some kids are not individually, intrinsic, where they're really quiet, so you can't assume that they're going to figure this out. So building opportunities for them to figure out what they are that they have a passion for, using that to help them bring their confidence over, right? Second of all is having others talking to them, encouraging about the positives. Sometimes we always look at that, because kids right now, the problem with this is they always compare themselves to others. That's why you see more mental illness and depression and anxiety than ever before. What you young ones got to be careful is when you're watching and seeing this person's life, that person's life, first of all, a lot of that's just like fake smile. But you start feeling like, man, this person has that. I don't have this. I don't have that. How can this person's life has been so great? Mine isn't. So that becomes a big problem. The other aspect of it is when you posting and people don't like, and you feel like when you get a like, there's a thing called a dopamine. You feel like, man, people liked it. But when you realize that, I mean, no one said anything, man. If it's been 6 hours and no one's even said a thing about my picture, the only thing someone said, man, that, ill, or something like that. Now you're hurt. So that's why, especially for young ladies, self-image posting, be careful what you post, because you're going to get comments on both sides, right? And that could become, and that could be a detrimental to online. And especially why I've seen more than ever before, because kids are watching, experiencing, thinking like, this is great. Back then, when you lived in the neighborhood, everything you saw is what you saw, right? You didn't have the website to see. You saw something on TV, you're like, okay. Now the problem is kids are seeing everyone and all this, and I went on this vacation, that vacation. That's why I always tell parents, so even if you go somewhere, don't have to post it out to everybody, because some people might not be able to, right? So I think it becomes challenging. Even as adults, you see some people feel like, well, this family goes here. We don't go here. This person gets to go here. And then that confidence of who you are, what you are. So I think the idea of talking to them, giving them opportunities to figure out what their strengths are and what skill sets or hobbies or passions to go ahead. Then sometimes even getting a life coach to help them with skill sets if it's really tough, or if they have anxiety, and saying, hey, how do you coach that out? That's making you feel scared to go above and beyond, right? Sometimes you got to put them in the water just to have them learn how to swim, right? You know how when they're young ones, like I never learned how to swim until older, so I'm scared. But my young one, they're like, no, just we're going to put him in the water. He's going to scare, but we'll teach him young. Like I'm scared of dogs because my mom used to be scared of dogs. Every time I used to watch you across the street. So I made sure my kids are not. So I'm like, hey, neighbor, can you let my kids like young age get used to it? Just so they don't have the same fear. So I had to catch it early, knowing that it could be. And all of us as adults, we have to be honest of our weaknesses, because some of those genetics are going to. So if you have a family of genetics of depression, you need to catch that early and say, we need to have this child to be a person of exercising. Exercising increases serotonin levels. We have to be honest. Like I have family of heart disease. So I know I have to stay fit. I love my biryani and all the desi food, right? But my dad has 8 stents. All his brothers have stents. One of them passed away with a heart attack, right? My dad's kind of sick due to the heart issue right now. So I have to be careful in educating my kids. So also looking at some of your skill sets of anger issues. If someone has an anger issue, that means it's in the family somewhere has it too. It doesn't just happen, right? You can have extreme cases. Like sometimes when you have someone with special needs, or like things can happen. Make things easy for all of our families. But we have to catch them early and saying, because sometimes we go, well, that's a boy, he'll be okay, he'll grow out of it. No, you have to catch it and slowly wean off wherever those habits are. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah make it easy. I know we had, questions on the lady side.
Assalamu alaikum.
Mom, Sam.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question related to the kids, I guess, how to phrase this. So I guess like when we were growing up, there weren't a lot of Muslims in our schools and in our areas. So whenever we saw a Muslim family or we had a Muslim in the class, our parents would always say, go be friends with them, make an effort, have that brotherhood, sisterhood, and, try to make each other stick out, keep an eye on each other. What I'm seeing now is that, mashallah, the community is like growing exponentially. You can't necessarily make that assumption that every Muslim does everything that we're expecting our children to do. And a lot of them end up being bad influences for our children who are trying to do the right thing. So how do you balance trying to give them that environment of brotherhood and trying to develop that awareness of who they are with their identity, with like potentially having someone who's doing something that's even worse than like non-Muslims would be doing?
Yeah, excellent point. And I think especially when you have communities where there's a lot of Muslims here, again, parents, we have to do our homework. That doesn't mean someone's Muslim, right? And people are like, how can that be? You go back home, I think I trust a lot more Muslims here than I trust back home, right? Sometimes you're like, okay, don't say you're from America, have that, be careful where you go, don't go by yourself in the taxi, right? So there are going to be situations. So I think you made a great point, sister. We have to, even who the friends, the families, and what their rules are, because even all of us have our own rules. Some might say, hey, we're okay with kids listening to music. Some might say they won't. Some might have this movie's okay. Some they'll let you watch it at home. Some of us might say food is okay to eat. Some might not have that. So we also have to have conversations with our kids and saying, what is our expectations of what you want with your kids? And then what are friends and individuals that we think? That's why when you get those small group friends, like what they call play dates, where you get to play and start, because what you're not just figuring out the kids, you're also figuring out what the parents' mentality is. Because one day you're going to go and stay at their house. If that means, guess what? They're downstairs watching TV and parents are like, whatever, and no one's watching, that could be problematic because now your child might be introduced to something that you didn't think that you're going to introduce to because you won't do that at our house. So I think that plays a big part, that finding out also as parents, like, hey, whose house they're going to, what's their rules and regulations. When my child, when our kids used to get invited to a party, I'll be like, my wife, like, okay, can you ask their, mom, who's staying, who's watching, where are they going to be, what's going to happen, right? When, the kids used to like at my house because when they used to come, when they were my daughter before the high school, right? When they were young, if someone had a phone in their fourth grade, I'm like, my dad's rule is that you have to keep the phone by the front door. You could go play with all my kids, hang out, but the phone, it can't be inside the room. My daughter doesn't have a phone, you need to keep it here. Something my daughter, oh my God. Now at 9th grade, I'm not going to ask high school kids a different ballgame. I was like, that's our rule. You need to do that. We need to have that. You have to play. You can't be upstairs in your room. You can hang out. Like when they were 0 to 13, they could never be in their rooms in front of their friends. They always want to be around so I can see what's going on. Yes, there's a certain time I have to be like, okay, now you're teenagers. Keep the door open so at least we could see what's going on with you guys. Just those are certain rules, regulations. Even for us parents, we have to, like, if I have when my child is 34 years, I want to have them sit with the 13, 14-year-old kids, especially with phones, because you don't know what's going on, right? Even when you have family, you're having just kids by themselves, you got to be aware. A lot of other factors or situations do happen. So I think that is very important to be aware of who, not just your kids' friends, but who are their parents, especially if they're Muslims, and like, what's their views, where are they hanging out, where are they going? I'm sorry, I have tracking of all my kids. Where they are, where they're going, check. Sometimes you have to do a random check, right? Because just for the sake of having it. At the end, we're not saying our duty is to have trust, but you can't have blind trust. Allah tells us that we are made of fitra, that we could get tempted. So that's our duty as friends to help support, as families to support, relatives to support, and as parents. I always remind my kids, I say, look, I'm not going to be questioning about your mom, but I'm going to be a question about you guys. The kids. I said, Allah's going to ask me, what you do with, so-and-so, did you say about prayer, if you didn't pray, whatever, what did I do, right? Everyone's going to be questioning each other, right? So Allah protect us. So that's a good point, sister. Yes.
Okay, we have a question from online, but we'll give priority to the audience here. So someone else had a question here? You had a question?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Yes.
I had a question about conflict in marriage for the parents and how that affects the children.
Yes.
And how that affects them presently when they're young and how that manifests into their future marriages. If you could elaborate on that. I think there's other sisters here that would
No,
really
no,
appreciate it.
thank you so much for bringing that up. That by itself is a topic. But one of the things, if you ever looked at okay, even before we talk about marriage, just think about this. If you go to counseling, and again, there's no taboo of having counseling because some people, and especially like right now, you've seen it ever before, the Muslim counseling group, I forget, it's based here, it's full. So one thing you realize when you go to counseling, a lot of times, a lot of issues as they get adults, they always ask, how was your childhood? It's the first question they ask. How was your child? Even when you're 30, 40, how was your childhood? Because while you've grown up, what you see, you get habits of what your dad or your mom do. I don't care what it is, it does happen. So that plays a big part of what they see, the interaction between mom and dad plays a big part of how they're going to have their relationship when they get older. If the only times they see, kids always joke around, the only time I saw my mom and dad talk is like about grades or something or about us, right? Or they talk to me about throwing out the garbage can. If we're not just, throwing out the garbage, they don't have conversations, that plays a big part. And Allah make things easy on any family. So when there is a conflict, that not to do it in front of the kids. If there are conflict, do not disrespect your other spouse in front of the kids. And now if the situation comes to a point that you have to separate, do not let the kids have to pick and choose. That becomes tough, especially when they're young. Like 0 to 13, 14 becomes very tough because now they feel like if I go on this side, I'm disappointing mom. Because kids are close to mom when they're young. So dads, you should never disrespect the mother of their child. Vice versa, at the same time, when sometimes the child might be closer to you, you cannot disrespect the father and kind of say, this is the reason. What you have to say, there are two adults and you need to rectify it because if they throughout, then they're going to have trust issues and they're going to have issues of trusting anyone and then dealing with conflict. Because if they feel like they can't conflict and deal with it, within mom and dad couldn't deal with it, any time in life as they go through, like forget about it. Because they don't feel like they were able to fix some things or go through or say, hey, you know what? But they felt like even if they separated, but they're very respectful, they'll say, okay, maybe if something didn't go right, but they really realize even in tough situations, there's still wisdom, being generous, being kind, even in tough things. Even think about Allah tells Musa alayhi salam to Pharaoh, go with kindness to a guy who thought he was God and didn't believe in all these signs. And Allah tells just still come with kindness. And so when you have someone who are blood, where you have together produced a child, that then we need to make sure that plays a big part, from the communication to the roles of the family, to the conversations with the family, how you respect your elders, even how you talk to your grandparents, your kids' grandparents. The way you're going to deal with them is the way they're going to deal with you. If they don't see that you're kind to your mom and dad, like as adults, like my own father, going visit them, seeing that, they should see you take care of them. Then they're going to have this in their mind that that's my job too. But if you don't let them see it, that experience, if you don't let kids experience things, they're not going to have it. I'll tell you the greatest thing that ever happened to me. My parents are from Hyderabad, India. He came in 1960. At 6 years old, I went to India. Couldn't remember. 8, remember. Age 14, he sends me to India. I go to Hyderabad, India. You get there, hot. This is 14, 15 years old. Auto, lamb, cows there, sheep's everywhere, hot. I finally get there. I go ahead and get there. This is 85. This is like 1985, right? So this is when still were like, things were not on like no cyber city now, right? So some of you guys might not understand. All the elders will. I'm thinking like, they used to call me ABCD, American Born Confused Daisy. I used to call them when they came FOB, right? So that was the thing. So now I'm there. They have, first thing I come in, I want to drink the water. They said the water, you can't drink it, right? You have to go outside, get the well water, Yakutpura, India. So I'm from there, get the water, boil the water. Electricity goes out every few hours, so you can't even cool the water down. Then finally, when you drink it, then you slowly, stomach can't handle food. Then you have to go to the bathroom, and the bathroom was outside, right? Then you go outside, it's like it's a ground. Then you walk into there, those chiplees or the geckos. Then you got to worry about the jinns inside that bathroom, right? Then you sit there. Then I'm really worried about it. The food is great, hot. Mosquitoes love American blood. 2 months, I'm like, Then my father's like, no, send them to Salem. So I go to a village, so where I get picked up in a buffalo cart. And in that buffalo cart, then you're going to go ahead and, so I'm living on lantern, like, the lanterns and back in there. And the bathroom was after Maghrib, they're like, hey, it's just 2 rocks. And they're like, hey, don't go after Maghrib because then we have to see if snakes, because we're living in the village. I hated it, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I get to experience. When my dad's 8 siblings and my mom's 8 siblings all came to our 2-bedroom apartment after they get settled and moved on, and like, man, why is everyone over here? Why? Bob was like, it's all about taking care of others, and we only 8 kids with 2 eggs. Yeah, okay, inshallah. But until I saw it, and so this is how you live, and this is even better in the 80s from the 60s, shukran ya Allah, anything you need to do, right? Experience. So I think it's so important for our kids to experience how to budget, to tell kids no. Sometimes you can't buy stuff for them. To say that, hey, this is the limited expense you have. This is the struggle. See them, you exercise. See them, you volunteer. Like Shy Care, I think it's a great opportunity for all your kids to volunteer. We take our kids, to Shy Care so that way they could go see the homeless. At least let them experience it, right? They have some pickup drops. They'll take you to the city of Chicago and see what poverty still is even in here if we can't go back home. So those are kind of things I think is very important. Coming back to, so that family, if whatever they see and hear and the way you react and talk, it's going to take a psychological effect on them when they go later. Again, I'm trying to do a short version answer. Yes.
So I had a question about, I know you touched upon screen time a little bit, but
yes,
my kids are under 10 and I'm struggling a little bit with video games and screen time.
Yeah.
What would be your advice on balancing that? And
sure. So if your kids are young, you need to have 2 things. Kidsinmind.com. Any cartoon, you need to first type the cartoon up or movie or books and it'll give you a great breakdown. The Christian right groups have done a phenomenal job on this. Kidsinmind.com and Common Sense. Those are 2. Common Sense Media and kidsinmind.com. You have that. That's 1. Second thing, you need to put a block on your TV and you could put parameters of how long the Wi-Fi works. You get a Disney 360, or you go to Comcast, some of you guys who are IT specialists, everyone has a family member who's an IT specialist who can know how to block off the 2 hours that the Wi-Fi works, and after that, it's off their phone. Because we're too busy, our lives are too busy, especially my generation, both of us might work, so our lives are too busy to educate them or block the TV, so you need to go ahead and do that. 4th, I'm not saying close the media, TV, video games, but you have to put an hour on it, and that's it. But that means more reading, checkers, other sports, getting out and making sure that, think about it, if they're 8 hours at school, if they're going 2-3 hours on video, playing 2 homework, we're not even talking to the kids anymore. So that's why having some opportunities of talking to kids, letting them write down what they want to watch. So when it used to be like Backyardigans. I don't know if they're anywhere. My kids would be like, okay, I want to watch Backyardigans, Blue's Clues, whatever. I'm like, okay. As it got older, then it became like, Transformers, whatever those are. And you say, all right, I want to know what that is. Pokemon, it was very popular back then. So those are certain things that say, all right, that's what it is. Friday, Saturday, okay, we're going to give you a few hours. But what's happening is this has become an easy way to keep kids quiet. Shh, quiet. Okay, I'm going to give you the phone. Right? And that's what's happening. But if your child at 1, 2, 3, 4 is watching this and all this bright lights, now you realize why a kid has a hard time having attention. ADHD has increased more than ever. Again, sometimes it could be chemical imbalance. But when at a young age, they're already seeing flashes every few seconds to keep them going, and everything's instant, then it's hard for them to just know how to stay calm. That's why when schools like our school, we say like there's no videos and so on and so forth, it could be a reinforcement. They could watch it just for 20 minutes. But teaching on the iPad, I don't think it should happen in 5th, 6th grade. That's why you see people like Facebook, Jobs, all these guys did not let their kids have their own devices. They did that. Facebook does not let his own kid go on Facebook. TikTok, China does not let the Chinese people go on TikTok. They have a limited on what they can have, right? They have that, but the whole world, like TikTok, right? And the people who create some of these devices, some of the musicians who, were singers, sometimes these rappers did not even let their own kids listen to their own songs. He said, look, this is entertainment. I want to make my money. I'm just having my own kids not do it. You need to police your own kid. That's not my fault that your kids are doing this, right? So that's why I think one of the big things is putting time limits. But if you could start that plays a big part, and that means alternative, going, having fun. It's ibadah to go to Chuck E. Cheese and play. It's fun, right? Family time, enjoying, playing games. I tell kids, they say Bismillah before you play. Hasanat. Smiling, respecting, that's hasanat. So Other alternatives have to be, and not everything doesn't have to be a lecture for religious programs, and other factors of coming together where you could do stuff and figure things out is huge. Yes, sorry, question on the sister side?
Any questions on the sister's side? If not, we'll take it
No,
from
I
the
was
brothers.
just going to fill you in. The place is called Khalil Center. Earlier in your question you were answering, so just wanted to fill that in. Thank you. They have some good programs going on for the sister that you asked. There's a science and spirituality marriage workshop. There was a parenting course. They actually offer these online too. So please check those out. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of alternatives in Sub Khalil Center, and there are other places that could really help out. And that just really quick, if someone's going through something, it's nothing wrong to find counselors, Muslim counselors, to help with the process, because it's not just you. As adults, you might know how to manage it, but young kids have a harder time. So that's why I think it's very important to kind of keep that in mind. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. It's more of a generational question. So when we were growing up, mom says, don't do it, we didn't do it. Grandma said that, uncle said that, aunt said that, mom said that, dad said that. We were like, okay, they said that. Most of the time we were like, okay.
Yes.
Now, when we say don't do it, the question comes, why?
Right.
And why not? And the whys and why not don't seem to be ending. It's like, how do we deal with that question?
See, but this is very important. When we have a why not, we have to answer that question. I know it's tough, because especially when it comes to faith, because Allah has answers for everything. The reason why we wrote the book War Within the Hearts, Struggles of the Muslim Youth, because I ask questions. Why can't we do this? And people are like, it's haram. Okay, why is it haram? Don't ask so many questions. That's haram. I'm like, I just want to know. Allah has answers for things. So I think it's very important for us to kind of have that. Now, there's certain other things like, hey, and sometimes, even with my kids, like sleepovers. I'm like, Baba, why can't we sleep over somewhere? I was like, look, first and foremost, if there's other boys there, have that. And you know what? 70% of molestation or stuff like that happens with someone they know in the family, someone else. So I'm like, if there's a boy there, there's a reason for it. Oh, why do we have like the alcohol, right? We explain and say, look, right now, 1 out of 4 accidents is caused by a drunk driver, right? In college, 1 out of 4 women will be sexually harassed, right? There are stats to show why there's limits and rules. And I think when you start doing that, when we in the books, we have to use stats, especially when kids get older, and say, why can't there? And say, look, here's the reason why. That Allah has given us specific things. Even there's young kids, there's some other stats I want to share, but I won't. But having sometimes why of understanding, because the deen has answers for this. Even this idea, I know that right now, no one asked this question, so maybe I won't bring it up because no one asked this question about what's happening right now in the community about these topics. But we have to have an answer for some of this social, for the first one, right? There's been a lot of questions on this, right? But I was like, and so I think we have to have answers for these specific kind of situations, right? Like and so I think it is very important that, when I give you an example. One time I worked with a guy who wanted to do some extreme stuff, right? So they put him, and the crazy part, I was like, and the person said, well, these people who are extreme, they call them extreme, but they have major beards. They're living on, in the rocks. They have to be good people, right? How can you call them extremism? I had to remind them. I said, you know what? Allah gives us examples that the grandkids of the Prophet ﷺ, one of them gets beheaded by another Muslim. A person who may be connected to a Sahaba or Tabi'in, and they had a beard and everything too, right? You have Uthman radiallahu anh who's killed by another Muslim. So I want you guys to realize, just because some Muslim does something doesn't mean anything. So sometimes we have to have these conversations and saying, our deen is the haqq. You need to know Quran and Sunnah, are they doing the right things? So sometimes you have to clarify certain things, because if not, they see hypocrisy, right? You sometimes at the masjid like, oh, Islam is peace. But I'm like, look, I see everyone arguing with each other. Even at masjids, the uncle so-and-so yelled at so-and-so. But you have to say, you know what? Allah tells us. That's why Allah tells us in the Quran, the first 3 people to be thrown in the whole fire will be one who said, I fought for your cause, I gave for your cause, I learned for your cause. The first people will be people who believed in Allah, but they did things for the wrong reasons. So I think we have one thing I realize now, certain things like curfew and say, hey, Baba, why do you have to be back by 11 o'clock? Because after 11 o'clock, there are more car accidents than ever before. More people who are out there not there for the right reasons. You have to have those things, especially in the society where before we'd be like, Baba said, Maghrib time, you better be there. Maghrib time, I was there. Now these kids ask a why question, so we have to kind of give them, not just from a religious standpoint, sometimes using statistics to show why this doesn't make sense and why you got to be careful, right? Like, oh, what's wrong with smoking cigarettes or weed? Well, because weed and cigarettes is a gateway drug, is a gateway to extreme stuff, right? Because at a certain time, they want to try something more, the buzz, right? Because now weed, everyone's like, oh, what's wrong with it? But I'm like, if it alters your mindset, oh, but it does it the first 2 times, but then you keep on using it, and why do you get different doses? Even at the weed shop, they give you 0.25, 0.5, 0.7 because your body gets used to it and you want a higher dose. And that becomes complicated. Any other questions?
Last question, because we need to wrap it up. If anyone has one more question, maybe from the sister side? No questions from the sisters? We have one brother who has a question. We'll take his question and make that the last question.
Okay, sure.
And we'll wrap it up, inshallah.
So I have siblings who are like, say 10, 15 years younger than me. So obviously we're not mama, we're not baba, we don't have the same authority in the household. So aside from just being there for our siblings, how can we, how can we help foster these things for our siblings?
I think it's good. If you're older siblings, it's very important. If you have younger siblings, what you do and say and how you talk to your elders and talk to your parents, talk to others, they're going to keep. Young brothers look at older brothers, young one's going to look at that. So I think one is that you want to first show it by action. That's the number one thing, right? You could do it by action. You can't go wrong because you have to say the respect that you show to others are going to have that. Second thing, you're going to have to listening ear. Sometimes older siblings are going to be tough love and like beating them and have that. But you have to realize that at a certain time, that could also be psychological damage too, because you want to pick on someone. So I think it's very important that not just show by modeling good behavior, then opening up and saying, hey, look, I'm seeing stuff. Or I've seen some kids like, look, if you know you're doing wrong, just because like, I don't want to be hypocritical, like that doesn't mean you tell your brother, okay. You say, look, man, I'm messing up. I just don't want you to do the same thing, and you know why? Because I've come to a point where I can't stop myself. So sometimes I've got some guys who are really doing some dumb things. And I'm like, look, but now your little brother's doing this. And I'm like, at least speak up and say, I'm messing up. At least he knows that don't be like me, right? Be me and the good stuff. Don't look at the good things, right? Like my mom, once, my mom used to be always on my case about, don't do this, do this. I'm like, I do this. Like, why you? And my mom made a point. I'm like, why don't you tell me this when you were, younger? I was younger. She, at the end, she said, look, as my job, mom, I'm going to love you for the rest of your life, right? I'm your mother. So my job is not to just praise you and say, mashallah, you did this, mashallah. My job is to find out your negativity because others are going to use that against you. If you have an anger issue, I need to control it because later on that could affect you at job. It could affect you at spouse. It could affect you in the community. It could affect you there. Hey, I had a habit of biting my nails. So at a young age, I'm like, stop, because it becomes a habit. So sometimes still when I'm thinking I do, my kid started, right? And one time my wife had told him, like, look, come on, stop. He goes, but Baba does it. Now I could be like, hey, what did you say? I said, you know what? That's correct. But that's why your mom's asking you because when Daddy told me I didn't listen the way I should have. We want you to not to do it. Take that thing as a teaching moment, right? You have to sometimes call it out. And I think that is something like modeling it, opening for communication, giving nasiha, or getting someone could talk to them because you realize this. Because a lot of us sometimes know, but we don't want to bring our parents. But if you feel like it's not parents, but then someone in the elder in your community or your family has to speak it up. Because if you don't let it go, it could go really far. Maybe they're doing something with opposite gender, hanging out, going to parties, but you don't know where it goes. Like, oh, I think it'd be under control. You never know. That's why having those conversations and doing that. And then the young ones, remember, if you teach someone a bad word, every time that person uses it, you also get the sin. If you teach someone a good word like Salaam Alaikum or teach them Surah Fatiha, and every time they use it, you get a good deed until the rest of their life. right? So you want to make sure that you're promoting good, inshallah ta'ala. Allah barakah. So one last thing for all the kids, for any youth here, if you could just remember your 5 salahs, I'm telling you, if Allah just knows that for five times throughout the day you took some time to remember Allah, Allah's got your back. If you could be just a good person and never lose hope in Allah. I don't care what your mistake is, never lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will have mercy, but you have to also, then my last one, be open to suggestions and be open to realize that you don't know it all. Parents, last thing is open communication. If you feel you're getting frustrated with your kid, find someone who can help you get to that point you want to get to, and never lose hope in your kids, and keep on making dua, and especially mothers' duas and parents' duas is the most important thing. So making sure on both sides we have to work. The community is different. Back home, every day, every parent was the same. Here, there's different styles of parenting, and that's why you have to kind of be more involved and work together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide everyone, inshallah ta'ala. Sheikh? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry, I know you didn't give it, you asked about the ladies' question. Do you have time for one last question? I just want to hear your perspective about sending kids to Islamic school versus public school. Would I be raising sheltered kids if I send them to Islamic school, keep them away from all the fitna, and then come college, they're suddenly exposed to all of this? I just want to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay. Sure. All right, so I'm just going to finish with these two. So the question about Islamic schools and public schools. First and foremost, we have to realize everyone, wherever you live, sometimes there's going to be options and there might not be options. That becomes one. Second of all, I think it becomes is from I just want to bring all these things up because first I want to say, do you have an option? Do you not have an option? Then it becomes a financial option. Does it not financial option? Does it have the grades that your child's in? That becomes the third thing. Fourth is, hey, is it a new school? Sometimes you go through that growing pains and feel like the academic standard's not there. If all 3 or 4 of these things can be possible done, I'm a big believer than ever before that we need to see if you have opportunities where your kids could have, where we push for great academic success. But I do feel like as community members, as parents, and even first generation coming, where maybe our school districts, a lot of us went to the city, maybe we weren't the greatest, but our parents made sure academics was important, that we became successful. Some of our parents went back home schools, and they were able to be successful here. So if you could make sure and build that reinforce it at home, the idea of 8 hours where they could see, like right here, see, discuss, and experience the deen, the environment is going to be huge. Because now, as a family, all you have to do is reinforce the concept. Are they going to be blocked off Cancun? The whole world is right on their phones. How many people just came from overseas and become successful? They've been able to navigate. And some things that you maybe they don't know about, subhanAllah, because it might come later on in life. So my whole thing is, like I've had kids up to 8th grade. My 2 daughters are in public high school. So one's just graduating, now going to college. They were able to balance, and especially if I grew up here, I'm going to expose them already what they need to. Some stuff I don't need them to expose. And then inshallah ta'ala, so now what happens is I feel the ones when they give examples where they go crazy is we're already the parent there's already very hardcore on the deen, like, okay, and then they feel like freedom. Or they're the only reason the parents bring them because the parents themselves don't practice, so they think it's hypocritical, right? I've seen so many kids and say, well, I don't have, why do I pray? No, my dad doesn't pray, so I don't have to. This is just an assignment, right? So that becomes a 2. So with that, I would always I'm a big believer, if you can, and if you could promote how other universities became great, like all like the Harvards and everything were all religious schools. It was Puritans, started the school. Exeter, the oldest elementary high school, Exeter, it's 200 years old, used to be by the Puritans. So everything happens and it takes some time. So I'm a big believer now than ever before, because what's different than before? First, there's a lot more options and opportunities to do stuff that we weren't before and exposed by the phones. Second of all, now there's morality discussions that before maybe were just discussed in high school or maybe middle school are now being promoted in early childhood and not giving us the right to decide what our values. That was never done before. Because even when you were in middle school, if you wanted to not go to a party, like the school dance, you didn't have to go. You didn't want to go to the Halloween party, skip the day. You had that. But now when it's not about one day, but every single day, there are certain concepts like the LGBTQ. I'm just kind of saying that just because of various ages here. That becomes a question that now, what is your school doing? And if you are in a school, again, but then we have to advocate. When I knew my daughter was going to go to Niles North, I wanted to make sure we have the salon room, the prayer room, and all that. And I didn't start with my kid there. I started with her in first, second grade to say, by the time they get there, I'm going to have stuff set up. So even if your child is right now young in your Islamic schools, how do I make the Islamic school get better? Because by the time my kids get there, I want to make it successful, right? Even when we started the high school, we didn't have one for 60 years. Now we do. My youngest son is getting there. Because I'm like, how do we get what we want to get? Might not be at this time. It might be 7 years down the line. But we have to, because even if my kids didn't benefit, everyone else, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I always say there's 3 ways that when we pass away, we're going to get hasanat. Knowledge that you give, and a school does that. Sadaqah jariyah, you can get that from school. And righteous offsprings who make dua for you. A school could develop righteous offsprings, inshallah, with the support of the family. So I'm a big believer than ever before with the navigation. And if there's situations at your school, we as family, in a respectful way, have to say from our religious freedom, we just have some say in exactly what our child should be exposed to. I think in a very critical team effort approach from the masjid, that's what we're trying to do a lot when we do with our schools, is to have that conversation, being respectful. First, we love all creation. We respect people, but that does not mean we have to accept the lifestyle. We respect, look, all of us have friends who drink. I say, look, when has that ever been because if I don't believe in your drinking, that I'm anti-phobic? I'm not for drinking, if I don't believe in alcohol. Fornication, parties, all these. Hey, we always had our stance. It was respectful. But now when you're saying our stance, we can't have our own respect, our values, that's where we as a family have to, when I told her, we have to hear what the kids are going through, we have to advocate, then we need to, educate, advocate, and then follow up to make sure that we're taking care of that. So that is something that we have to, so that if certain things like this, especially in the lower grades, I get worried because now, how can you decipher when they're so young and where you don't make a decision about driving until 16, alcohol until 21, even movies 8, 13, 17, but on certain topics they want to tell you at the age of 5. Again, very respect. I have people I work with, have no issues, they're great. I think this is where we need to have a little stance. Inshallah. Allah protect.
Okay, Jazakumullah khairan for being with us here this evening, despite the personal circumstances. Yes. And we went over time. He does have to head out, as he does have somewhere to be. So we thank him for his time. The last thing that I want to mention is next month, inshallah, September 30th, which will be a Saturday, inshallah, Masjid al-Huda will be having a major event here, which is our next program. Next, in September 30th, which will be a Saturday, we'll have a special program on the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with multiple scholars, multiple reciters, and multiple nasheed artists as well. So that's marked that day on the calendar. We're going to have the ad out shortly. We'll have the flyer out for that. So again, that's next month, September 30th, Saturday, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.